So we'll just jump in and get started right now. And so really what we want to do is we just want to welcome everyone to this huddle that we have on emotional stability. We're very excited for this topic, emotional stability in uncertain times. Can I get an amen? Like we need this, we need this talk, we need this wisdom coming in and pouring in, not only for us, but also for the people we're leading and interacting in. And so I'm very excited for the chance to learn from Russell and Ann Fryer. We have them with us. They are missionaries with us in Vietnam, and they are serving actually in Hanoi, and they have a counseling ministry called, I think it's Crosspoint, right? Crosspoint
Yes.
Counseling Ministry. They invest in marriages, they invest in their community, and they have actually a fantastic website that you can actually get more short like podcasts and clips and like just really short, what do you call them, like practical tips, right?
Yes. Yep.
Practical tips, I would say. So I want to give that to you now. Maybe Maya can type it into the chat, but it is allthingsmarriage.family. And it is a very great resource that you can use and that you can pass on to others. Just short clips and videos of practical tips, which I find are amazing. And so we want to thank you so much for that. And really, I would love to turn it over to you, Russell and Ann. In just a little bit, I wanted to make one more announcement. As we're doing this huddle, we're going to have time for Q&A throughout the huddle. So if something they're saying, you were like, oh, I'm really curious, I want to know more about that, I want to know more about that topic or that issue, you can either feel free to type it in the chat, and we'll, during those pauses or those breaks, we're going to talk about them, or you can, during those times, just kind of unmute yourself and share the question yourself. So either way, type it in the chat, or you can share it yourself. So we're going to have that all throughout the time today, because we don't want to get to the end and then you have like so many different questions. So it can be kind of conversational and leading and guiding. And so Russell and Ann, how about you just tell us more about yourself and then just dive into the topic of emotional stability in uncertain times.
Well, we are really excited to be joining you all. As she said, right now we're in Hanoi, Vietnam, so we're heading into night. Well, it is nighttime, and unfortunately, we're experiencing warm weather.
So rough.
It's rough, and we've been married for 30 years.
Coming up on 31 next month.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we've been in Vietnam a total of almost 19 years. But we first landed in Vietnam 27 years ago, March of 1994. So it's a different Vietnam that we are here with. And we have two children. One is 30 this year, and the other one will be 21, and she's finishing her university at Baylor, and Baylor is the NCAA champions.
Yeah, and a little side note on that, we lack some emotional stability during that win.
But our main focus of our ministry right now is really strengthening marriages. Yeah. Russell has a counseling center, which it was God's idea, and God got it started, even though the government said, wait 3 to 5 years or something like that. But God did it, and this year it will be 10 years since we first officially have a registration with the government.
So that's a little bit about us. And we, in preparing for about emotional stability in uncertain times, what a great title. And one of the thoughts I had is what is emotional stability? And if you kind of picture a bar where there's an upper bar and a lower bar, for most of our life, we have ups and we have downs, but it stays within those two bars. That would be emotionally stable. But life also has great joys, like the NCAA win, And also it has a lot of grief where we lose loved ones or other losses that are just so deep. So we're going to go above the bar and we're going to go down below the bar. That's also normal. It's just what is not healthy or what's unhelpful or becomes an issue is when we stay outside of those bars, whether it's up or down for too long of a period. And that is when we can notice real instability. And there's some people that might stay close to the bottom bar. And that could also feel that they're staying low too long. And that needs to be looked at. So just to that kind of gives a definition of what emotional stability looks like. So
that means normal
yeah.
up and downs is normal. And so don't feel like it's you're having some emotional issues.
Right.
Well, it's normal. And when you're a mom of little kids, that's pretty normal because yeah.
And a really good one of the things when I'm meeting for people in counseling that I'm looking for and asking them about is, or when they call me, is when they're wherever they are at emotionally is affecting them so in such a way that it's interfering with their daily life. So when it's interfering with your daily life, it's most likely outside that normal range.
And that's a good time to seek some professional help.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's just kind of give a picture of what we're talking about. And one of the scriptures that I found really helpful is, well, I've actually been in this book for a couple of months now, even before I was asked to do this. And right in chapter 1 of 2 Corinthians, and chapter 1, verse 2 through 4. And I'll just look at it real quick. And I should have had it already up there. Sorry about that. But in Paul's greetings, talk about grace and peace, which from God our Father, which is always wonderful. But he said that God is the God of comfort. He's a Father of compassion and God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God. And I was just thinking of all the ways that God has comforted us over the years. And I wanted to give you a second to think about and reflect upon how has God comforted you? What are the things that he has spoken to you or used other people, or you read his word and it was a great comfort? What are the things that God has used to comfort you? As you think about that, I know for myself, Ann and I were talking about this, and I felt encouraged just to remember how God has comforted us. And that's one of the a key tip is remembering God's faithfulness, remembering what he's spoken to us, remembering what his word says. And those are things I think as all Christians we're told probably multiple times through our Christian life, but we keep forgetting. And so encourage you to remember. Another thing is praying like the psalmist. I was telling Jody and Taryn as we prepared for this that for a long time, especially in my early Christian life, what are the Psalms for? I don't get it. There's just a lot of emotion and it's like, I'm not interested. Now that sounds funny from a counselor, but I wasn't a counselor then. And but David and the other psalmists, they poured out their heart to God. And it may seem that they were not emotionally stable. But the truth is, God doesn't expect us to always stay in between those two bars. When life is difficult, that's not realistic. And we can go to him and just pour out our heart. And that helps bring relief. Just if you've ever experienced just sharing with somebody your heart, and after you're done, you feel less stress, you feel the stress is gone. And that's what we can do with God when we pray like the psalmist. Some people like to pray the Psalms, and that's also really great. But also just being like that, sharing your emotions with God is really helpful. And I could go into a lot more on that, but another thing that is really helpful that I'm going to skip to my third point is really about vulnerability. When we keep our emotions inside, what we're going through, our fears, our worries, our concerns, it is great to talk to the Lord, like I said in point one about the Psalms, but it's really important to be able to share that burden with others, to be vulnerable, to find people that are like an accountability partner, a prayer partner, of course, your spouse, but to be able to be vulnerable about what's going on in your life. One of the biggest thing that leaders, leaders face is that we like to help people, but it's really hard for us to allow other people to help us and to be vulnerable about what's going on in our lives. And that, unfortunately, is one of the biggest traps of the enemy, is when we are trying to do it all by ourselves, because we can't. We need each other. So that's really important.
Yeah, this idea of vulnerability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, finding someone that you can share with. I heard Pastor Chris in the last huddle just talk about how he has different people accountable for different areas of his life. That is a great model for a leader to be able to have someone that can ask the tough questions. And as I was thinking about that, I was thinking about, boy, I would like to think of it as someone that will ask the questions that we all need to have asked in our lives. Because if no one asks them, it's really hard to actually just go up to say, hey, I need to tell you about this. So you are helping your brothers and sisters when you are that accountability person for them to ask those questions. It will help them not just stay pure, because that's certainly one thing, but it's also being able to work through, and so they don't become emotionally in trouble because they're trying to deal with it on their own. Okay, has there any questions come in? If not, I will continue.
I think just thinking through the question, even thinking through, like, I love the picture you did of the graphs. I actually was like writing down, like, this is your okay, this is your okay, this you're not okay. Like, I was writing like writing it down. It was like a super like analogy, like great analogy. And so like one of my questions is, like, especially in this past year and this past season with like COVID-19, in the States we're facing a lot of social justice and racism issues. You can feel like you're like, it's like crazy. Like our graphs can look crazy like right now. And so like, I feel like all these tips are great that you've been sharing and you've been giving of things to do. But when you're in like a crazy season, when you're surrounded by it, like, what would you, like, how does it, because sometimes it's like, it's not like, I don't know how I'm describing this or saying this, but you know what I'm trying to say? Like, you're in your world, when your world is chaos, like, how do you, and other people are going through it too. So it's like, it's not just me, it's like my world and all my people are going through it.
Yeah, I think there's two parts to that. One part is to make sure that you disengaged from all those stressful sources. I mean, it's important to keep a tab on the culture, what's happening in our community, in our nation, in our state. And I mean, I do that too. I look at the news, but I try to have an awareness like, okay, I need to stop.
Setting some boundaries.
Yes.
To know when it is just too much for you yourself to handle.
Right.
Emotionally.
Yeah.
Because there's just so many sources we can just kind of keep feeding our own emotional instability, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so it's good to know that boundary, to know, even maybe schedule only certain times that you can go to those sources, so that it's only that period of time and it's not all throughout the day. It would just be overload.
Yeah. So it's kind of being aware of when it's affecting you. And sometimes if you're married, your spouse is going to know. If you're single, then maybe some of your friends will notice that you're being irritable, that you're not being as patient as you normally would be. Those are really unhelpful feedbacks. Like, okay, that I didn't realize that was happening. That I've overloaded myself with all this stressful information, and I need to back off. I need to take a break from it. That's one thing. Now, for when we can't escape it, meaning that, let's say we're responsible for people that are in the midst of the stress, or we're in the midst of whether it's persecution or it's whatever it is that's going on. God is one of the things I really feel like he wants to speak to us, as especially the American church, is what Paul talks about a little bit further down in chapter 1 of 2 Corinthians in verse 9. And Paul in verse 9 goes, I just want to let you all know, we were in such a great distress, we thought we were going to die. So that doesn't sound like an emotionally stable time for Paul. He says, and this is an important but this happened so that we would learn not to rely on ourselves, but on God. And this was key, but who can raise the dead. So Paul says, I thought we were going to lose our life, but I needed to rely upon God who can raise the dead. So that's the powerful God we serve. And so much of the time we get in trouble because we're relying upon ourselves.
And I think one more thing, when everything is chaotic around us, or seems out of our control, is actually to set routines in place. To set routines so that
keep up the routines.
So that we have, or keep up the routine so that we have a regular time with the Lord, a regular time to pray, to be quiet. It was something that we did during our 14-day quarantine. When you're stuck in one room for 14 days together, it actually went pretty quickly because we had a routine that was going for us.
A healthy routine.
Yes. And so I'm a morning person, so I would exercise in the morning because there was only one little space for one person to exercise.
Between the bed and the wall.
Yes. And so I went first in the morning and then he would go in the afternoon. And so we did that every day. That was our daily routine as part of our routine, between breakfast and lunch and dinner, that was a routine. But this idea of having a routine to keep things more on a normal, even keel.
And one of the things because we really believe in things that are practical and that you can apply. Like when we find out that we're relying upon ourselves, well, what does it mean to rely upon God and not ourselves? And some of those cutting out the time, make sure we have our time with the Lord and really go back to pouring our heart out to him about our situation. that is an example of relying upon him. I think it's also an act of surrender, that no matter what happens, I know that I need to depend upon you, Lord, to walk us through, whether it is death, whether it is a loss of a job, or whether it is the uncertainty of what's going to happen with the church. Is that coming to that place of surrender and putting that burden and that all that stress to the Lord, and growing in reliance upon him is going to be one of the practical ways. And that's not easy to do. And just saying it doesn't mean it's easy. You know, I can now do that. It's a process. And we can be comforted that God took the Apostle Paul through that same process. And he knows how to help us rely upon him.
Yes, and I'm sure the Holy Spirit can also help us to know, you know, what is the best for us, because we're all different.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk just briefly about things that are the opposite of helping. They hurt. So it's helpful to know what are the things that can contribute to emotional instability. I've mentioned one, and that's when we just push our emotions down, when we just control, because they seem scary, that we don't know what to do with them. So we just push them down. And anyone that has lived long enough knows that when you do that, eventually they come out as health problems. It can lead to an explosion, all sorts of unhealthy behaviors that no one wants to experience. So that's one. It's also turning to other things as our main source of comfort. Now, I like dark chocolate, and and you know, sometimes it's like if I'm feeling a little tired or a little stressed, a piece of dark chocolate sounds good, and there's nothing wrong with that. And but if I was to sit down and eat a whole brick of dark chocolate,
That would be a problem.
That would be a problem, because I'm actually causing other problems that I might be dealing more with my weight, and which would become another stress, and lead to other issues. That's one example. So we can have a piece of dark chocolate, but it can't be our main source. We can't rely upon it. Another one is exercise. Sometimes when we exercise is important, but if we use it as our source of comfort, then we overdo it. And just being aware of when it gets out of balance, because then when we exercise too much, it actually isn't good for us. Another example is entertainment. I love something that's just relaxing to watch, but if that becomes where I, do lots of it, then again, it's out of balance. And that's some of the things that they're not bad in themselves. It's just that we take them too far, and that is our source of comfort. What ends up happening, it will actually, we can escape during the time we're doing it, but as soon as we're done, that anxiety or whatever emotion we're dealing with, it will come back. And it could even come back even stronger than before. And that's true with the other things that people end up turning to, like controlling behaviors. They can control other people because they are so uptight about what's going on, that they end up controlling in ways that they know they have in a sense that it's unhealthy, but they don't know what to do otherwise. Or turning to other things like pornography or other things, or substances. People can get involved in that, and then they feel trapped, and of course that leads to a damaging pathway. And these are all things, if you notice you're doing any of these things, it's just ask for help. Be vulnerable. because that's the best way forward. And another thing is avoiding the major issues. If you avoid them, it doesn't make them disappear. And so we want to be able to face those. And that gets back to getting to the point where we can surrender that to the Lord and with him face the issue, not in our strength because it's too overwhelming, but we can face it with him and instead of avoiding.
That's awesome. Are there any questions from what they just shared about the things that contribute to emotional instability? No, no question. All right, no worries. All right.
Well, it just means that we've explained it so well.
Explained it so well. So like very, very easy to do, which is great.
Yeah.
I guess I have a question.
Go ahead.
Oh, how do I want to word it? If you're noticing like different patterns of control where we're just trying to push our emotions down, they might cause a big eruption or result in, the physical problems, I don't know, lack of sleep, stuff like that. What are some practical steps in getting out of that?
Yeah.
In pursuing health?
Yeah, usually the first step is to kind of, if you're able to do it by yourself, to assess what's the cause, what is the stress, and then you start looking at what are you thinking about it. And one of the things that happens a lot is it's called catastrophizing. We make it so bad, and that causes a lot of stress. Like, if I don't get this cake made tonight for this important fellowship time, I'll ruin it and no one will have a good time. Well, it's like that's turning something that is already stressful into really stressful. So it's just being aware of what your thoughts are. What are you thinking? And how is that contributing to the extra stress? It's another thing you're touching on is what in my life is out of balance. Is my sleep out of balance? Is my intake of what am I eating out of balance? Like, if I'm so busy that I'm relying upon junk food to keep me full in between insufficient meals, well, that one, after a while, I'm not going to be doing very well on several levels. And so how am I eating? And then exercise. Am I exercising regularly? I just saw another article about 2 weeks ago where they always knew that exercise was important, but now they're going, boy, it's more important than we even thought, that regular exercise can help with emotional stability. Because it gets rid of stress. We have a place to take those emotions we're going through, and our body is building up chemicals and stuff that helps process them out. And so that's also very helpful. It's like, is there something out of whack? Now, when you're a parent and you got little kids, that's a challenge. It's like, how do you sleep well? How do you eat well? And how do you exercise well? And thankfully, there's periods of time where you do have enough resources that you can make it through those difficult times. But if you notice where you're starting to not do well, then that's getting back to voicing, I need support. I need to be able to sleep tonight. And being able to voice your needs. And sometimes it's true for, if you're married, for husbands and wives, sometimes let's say if Anne's under a lot of stress, well, I might be facing a stress and I don't want to add to her stress, so I don't tell her. Well, that usually is a mistake because she can tell that I'm stressed, but she doesn't know why. So that adds to her stress.
I think one of the key principles in this is that we cannot equate, if we have emotional instability, we cannot equate that with a lack of spirituality.
Right.
Okay, it is really not related.
No.
And so we need to learn that it's not shameful to be able to express that we are dealing with issues and that we need help. And so I think, unfortunately, when we are in ministry and we are in leadership positions,
Right.
we do have that tendency to think that if we're having problems, then there must be something wrong with my spiritual walk.
Right.
Well, there might not be anything wrong with your spiritual walk. You just might have some issues, maybe even a lack of vitamin or something in your body that is throwing you out of whack.
Right.
Here in Vietnam, some years we do not see the sun from January until late in April. So that's almost 4 months of not seeing the sun. And that affects me. That affects me. And I have to realize it's not my spiritual walk.
Right.
I am still close to Jesus. It's just that for me, not having that sun can really throw me in this emotional instability or push me in a more depressive, feel. So I think that's something we have to really realize. Do not equate our lack of emotional control with our spiritual walk.
Yeah. Yeah. Because when we get into, like she was saying, there's more and more research about when we get into different deficiencies, it does affect our mood. And it's really good to be, that's where medical checks are good. And there's, Dr. Jantz has done a lot of work with that. You might be familiar with him. He's a Christian psychologist out in the state of Washington. He has a number of good books, and he's actually just published one about the very thing I'm mentioning right now. It's called Anxiety Reset. And I haven't read it yet, but I listened to his podcast introducing it, and it sounded really helpful. And it's just being aware that it's not always what's happening in our life. It might be like Anne was just mentioning, the lack of sunlight, and other things that are resulting in a deficiency that we weren't aware of.
Yes. Yes. And sometimes you don't know any of that until you actually have specific testings done.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
great question.
Those are all great. Some of the comments that are coming in they're just really appreciating the points that you're sharing. You did a really great job of just making it very practical, which is very appreciative, because it's like, what can I do? Like, especially with emotional stability and instability, it's like, well, what do I do? Like, what are some practical tips? And so that has been very helpful. We're going to be closing out in the next few minutes, but is there any last things that you would like to share, Russell and Anne, about this topic? Or if there is any last minute questions as well, you can type them into the chat or also share them. But yeah, any last minute thoughts you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think I have one last thought.
Okay.
Yeah.
That we can feel, especially what's happening right now in the US, that we are on a ship that's just being tossed here and there, and with so much that's happening, we can feel this ship is just doing this type of crazy thing. And for some people, they get seasick. They're throwing up and there are all sorts of issues. I think in the midst of all this, we need to just realize we need to throw the anchor down. and the anchor is Jesus.
Mhm.
And that sure, we're gonna get tossed still. And the boat is still going to rock. But if we keep our anchor strong in Christ, He will keep us safe
Yeah.
through it, even though we are being tossed.
And remember, you're not the only one on the ship.
Mm,
That's good.
And
yes.
we need each other to be emotionally stable.
Yeah.
Where we can't do it alone. I mean, I could study everything to be the greatest counselor in the world and to have all the knowledge. I don't have it, but I could if I spent years and years and years, and still I couldn't do it by myself. Knowledge in itself is not sufficient. We need each other. I need encouragement from other people. So we're on the ship together.
Yes.
That's a fantastic analogy, because so many times I think putting my anchor down deep means I won't be tossed anymore. But like just with that analogy, I was like writing it down. I was like, oh my gosh, like, because you still get tossed, but you're anchored, which is really powerful. There was one question that someone had that I'm not sure if they want to type it in now,
Okay.
or if they want to unmute themselves, but I'll give us.
Yeah,
Sure.
thanks, Jody. Sorry, just running around with the kids here and trying to type. It's just not working out.
That's fine. That's fine.
But I'll just try to say it. When you have, say, a person or even a married couple where they come from, let's say, dysfunctional homes, perhaps highly dysfunctional homes, where problems were either not discussed and thrown under the rug, not able to be talked about, or on the other end where there was lots of yelling and screaming and even hitting, and you have people like that coming, into this world where mental health is a good topic to be talked about. What are some practical steps to, I don't know, just walk through that kind of thing, either separately or together? When you say weren't raised with those skills. I'm raising a couple kids right now, obviously with Shannon, with my wife, and just helping give those skills to them when to talk about their feelings, to not lash out, but just as an adult, trying to learn those at the same time. Just is there something that you could speak to about that type of situation?
Absolutely. One is, as I think you're painting a really good picture. If you as a parent are aware that that's what you want to do, I know that God helps us to do those things, and we're going to make mistakes, no matter if you had the most perfect parents raise you or not parents that didn't raise you well. You're going to make a lot of mistakes. But the individual issues, if you notice that you are having, and there's so many different issues that you can address, like that you don't feel well, there's anxiety, depression, or just a past trauma. I would, for an individual, I would recommend individual counseling to just work through those issues, because they are difficult, and I would just find a therapist that specializes to meet your need. The other thing is, for couples, there's several good avenues to try to work on the relationship. One of the things that we believe strongly with marriages is that it's always a work in progress. You can't stop working on it, and it's a joy to work on it. But sometimes we've run the Alpha Marriage course several times, which we highly recommend. But it's not for couples that are really in a difficult position. Now, some people,
their relationships are in pretty
deep distress.
It's not going to be helpful
now
for them.
There have been some couples that have been helped by that, but a lot of the couples that we have seen, like in Hanoi where we've run it, they've needed more than the Alpha Marriage course. And
marriage therapy, actually, if you can find marriage therapists who specializes in EFT, emotional focus therapy, we would highly recommend that, because it's based from research, 40 plus years of research, and just really incredible in how it deals with the relationship.
Yeah.
And the patterns that you fall into
Mhm.
over and over again.
Yeah.
We do that. But
Never.
it's a lot less now, you know, now that we were noticing our our patterns.
Yeah, and the creator of EFT, Susan Johnson, she wrote a book called Hold Me Tight. It's a great book. And again, when you try to do it through a book, it probably is not going to be sufficient. But if you are able to find a therapist that uses that model, having read the book actually has been shown to speed up the work in therapy.
Yes.
Did that answer your question, Bill?
He's chasing a kid, probably.
Right, Jason?
Yeah, I was just trying to do a couple things, but that was very helpful. I appreciate it, guys.
Okay.
I think
Yeah.
what I've been noticing too in this season and what I've been hearing is like, especially with the season we've been in, marriages have been on a ton of stress. And like, as we're leading people, as we're leading those around us, just realizing marriages are under stress and under time. And I know I've been talking to some marriage counselors who said like, we are like booked way out because of the stress that is coming on. But, and so those are really great tools that we can use for ourselves personally. Hello. Like, but also,
always.
but also for those that we're leading to know in this season and to recognize like there has been a ton of stress on individuals, on marriages, and on families. And so those are fantastic tools. My like notes are like, I'm running out of room, like from all the stuff that you've shared. And so Russell and Ann, I just want to thank you so much for the time that you've given to dive into this topic. I think this is something that is key, not only in the season, but for our lives, you know, and for our ministries and for how to know how we can help those who are leading, but also help ourselves. And even just that assurance that like, it's not linked to our like, doesn't mean you're a bad person or like, you know, spiritually off or whatever when you're going through that. I think it's very powerful. And once again, I just want to recommend, if you look up in the chat, there is their link to their website, allthingsmarriage.family, which has some fantastic resources. And I think you can even reach out to them personally through their website. Is that correct?
Yes.
Different things like that, which is definitely amazing. Some of the books that they recommended were Anxiety Reset book. I like have to turn my notes because I was running out of room. And the Hold Me Tight book were different ones that they recommended. And so thank you guys so much for this. If you were on this call, the link I think will also be sent to you so that you can go back and re-listen, because there were so many good points that they just listed out that you can go back and re-listen. If you ran out of room on your notes like I did, you can go back and get them. Pastor Chris, did you want to say something?
I apologize for not being on. I was waiting for a call for about a month, and the guy just called right when it was one of those I had to take. I apologize. I would love to hear or have you send me an email of all the books that you would recommend that would fit. You just send me a listing of books, then we can get that to our people as well. Or Jody, it doesn't have to be me, but I'm with what the little bit I caught into, you know, it seems to me that right now, anything that we're going through, like I just lost my father, anything we're going through seems to be amplified more so than like, I love my mom and my dad, but my dad died and my mom died earlier, and it was not as intense as what I feel right now. And the only thing I can attribute it to is that life is already intense, and then you add something like that. So I definitely think we're in a season where any of the books or any of the resources you can give us, we can build a library for people and get that to them, and save a spot for me on that couch. I can't wait to get to Vietnam.
Yes.
I took the shot.
Well, we would look forward to having you here.
I would love to come. You have no idea. I would love to come to Vietnam. So I'm looking forward
Got to
to
get the egg tea. Got to get, well, one of those coffees. I mean,
One of the cups.
great
Oh, yeah.
coffee.
I'll do it. I'll do it.
Awesome.
So
Well,
thanks for everything. Again, I apologize for not being able to be in on the whole
No
thing.
problem. Understand. And if I can just give one more comment
go for it.
to Bill's question, it circles back to something I said earlier. For a couple that grew up in chaotic situations or normal situations,
Mhm.
it's really that vulnerability with each other. And the biggest thing you can do is when you've had a conflict, is slow it down and find out what happened. How was the other person seeing it? How were they feeling? And that,
Really listen.
when really
Really
listen,
listen.
and it's important to not get back into the argument.
Oh, that's
It's
good.
just, yeah, that's just because if you start getting back in the argument, you just stop.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to add that for Bill, it's a hard thing to do. But when you can share what's going on inside, that is one of the things that will help you as a couple to be more emotionally stable, the way you want to parent, the way you want to have your marriage.
That's really
And
good.
Homely Type talks about that.
Oh, good. Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much for coming. I have a few quick announcements to highlight some upcoming things we have going on. Maya, our U.S. administrator, she's going to put them into the chat for you, the links. So the first thing I want to highlight is this Saturday, we have the Maid Movement Conference. And so this is a conference for women to attend. The great thing about it is if you register, you have access to it for 30 days. So even if you can't make it on that day, the link, it will work for 30 days. And so there's a link in there for that you can share, that you can send to people. We have speakers like Hannah Brencher, Pastor Carol Ball, and different Marlinda Ireland, Pastor Marlinda Ireland. So we have a fantastic lineup. The next thing I want to highlight is we also have our Oasis conference coming up, which is a time we like to say it's our welcome home moment for, you know, our pastors, our missionaries, our credential holders, our ministry leaders to come and be refreshed. And so that is May 18th and 19th, and you can sign up with the link there. And also, once again, that is also something where once you sign up, you also have access for 30 days after the conference because there's a lot of great material. We have Joe Saxton with us, Banning Leapshire. We have Chris Ball sharing, and some great lineup of panels and different things. So there's so much good information that you'll want to go back and watch it again and again. And then the last thing is we have some prophecy huddles coming up. And so, Maya, when are those huddles? I know there's two signups, one for 10 a.m. and 7 p.m. I forget the date of it. Do you have the date?
Say May 4th.
Okay, May 4th. And these are times where actually when you sign up, you're signing up for a slot to receive prophetic words. So this is kind of a time for you and the Lord and to receive what he's sharing, wants to speak over you. And so feel free to sign up for one of those slots. I think those are all the announcements I have. Once again, thank you, Russell and Anne, for your time and for all your wisdom. And I am just excited to apply these to myself and also to help give them to others that I'm leading and ministering to. So once again, everyone, thank you so much. And we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.